Okay, the talk today is going to look at some ethical dilemmas that we face in a time of dementia, and they're going to be dilemmas surrounding the diagnosis, the treatment, and probably the most neuralgic point in America, driving. Certainly, it's an enormous problem. I'm the assistant superior at a community of 80 mostly retired Jesuits. We have a 30-bed nursing home, Medicaid approved, a 30-bed assisted living, Medicaid approved, an active community, a retreat community, and a bunch of guys who are just hanging around, doing some fill-in work, doing some teaching, and living out on this splendid setting about 20 miles outside of Boston, just down the road from Boston College. So we come into a lot of these problems in a slightly different way than people do in their families. I've only been a Jesuit for 16 years. I was 48 years old when I entered. I was 58 years old when I was ordained. Two cool things. Number one, my mother was 90 and she was at the ordination. And number two, the two guys ordained with me are both younger than my college roommates' children. So we were having lunch on Tuesday, ordinations on Saturday, and I said, now look guys, after the litany of the saints, when we were flat on our faces in front of the altar, I said, you look left, you look right. If I'm having trouble, for God's sakes, help me get up. They were very good about that sort of thing. So the goals for this talk, also I'm a photographer by hobby. Most all the pictures are mine. If you're bored by what I'm saying, look at the pretty pictures, try to guess where I took them. There are three goals for this: to understand that the prolonged course of dementing illnesses raises ethical questions regarding early diagnosis in particular. Number two, appreciate why breathless announcements of a new breakthrough must be considered with skepticism, if not a totally jaundiced eye. And number three, realize that taking a driver's license away is not a punitive action on the part of the insurance company, the family, or the police. Now, before we get into the meat of the topic, we have to say, what's a Jesuit? These are 28 Vietnamese novices just outside of Saigon when I was there 2 years ago. Number 29 took the photo. So what is a Jesuit? A Jesuit is a member of the Society of Jesus, which is the largest men's religious order in the Catholic Church, that founds colleges and universities with great basketball teams. Marquette, Gonzaga, Georgetown, St. Joe's in Philadelphia. Please note, Notre Dame and Villanova are not Jesuit schools. Part two of the definition is a Jesuit is a man who, when asked a question, responds with another question. And the reason I included that definition, which I dearly love, is that my plan today is not to answer any questions. I want to raise questions. I'm going to ask questions, and you are going to have questions as well. Discussion is critical to coming up with answers for some of the dilemmas we are currently facing and the dilemmas we are going to be facing as time moves on. Sometimes we'll come up with good answers, other times answers to some of these questions and some that have not yet been asked will be temporary at best. So what is ethics? An ethic is a set of principles of right conduct. Some of them are written down, some of them we absorb as we're growing up. Whereas ethics is the study of the general nature of morals and of the specific moral choices we make as persons. There are two dimensions to ethics. You can come at it from the area of moral philosophy or from what we call moral theology. The study of ethics, the study of moral philosophy, the study of moral theology is kind of interesting because there's a theoretical dimension. This happens every time. But it's supposed to come through this. There's a theoretical and there are practical dimensions. Now, some of the theoretical discussions that you may see in the paper or in the academic press can be very dry, they can be very difficult to follow. But the challenge is that the ethical dilemmas we face have got to be figured out. Sometimes the questions push the limits to areas that we're really not prepared to deal with. But there are very practical applications. Those of you who read the New York Times on Sunday know the ethicist column. And sometimes the questions are truly bizarre. They almost seem too simple to ask. Other times the questions, I recall one, my father needed a kidney transplant. We brought a guy over from another country, took his kidney and sent him back to his home country. Was that ethical? Yeah, and that's one of the questions that medical ethics is currently grappling with today, the selling of organs for transplantation. So we're going to look at two different subtypes. There are a lot of areas of ethics, and they will emerge in response, usually in response to changes that are going on within society, within the nation, within the culture, depending. The two, here we have a picture of Washington in the fog. It's a metaphor for the ethical fog that surrounds our capital. I took this from the campus at Georgetown where I was living at the time. We have bioethics and social ethics, and those are the two that are most relevant to some of what I'm going to be talking about today. Bioethics, of course, deals with those problems, those controversies, those challenges that arrive in response to changes in medicine and or biology. One of the challenges with bioethics is they're always reactive to the situation. They're never proactive, predicting what's going to happen. Now, when Marianne and I were in medical school, HIV, AIDS did not exist. CAT scans were not in clinical use until we were interns or second-year residents. MRI scanning was a fantabulous dream, and I think I almost got goosebumps the first time I saw one. But the ethical problems that have arisen with things such as AIDS, etc., have been legion. When I was in college at Penn State, we had a required course in speech. And one of the debates was, there are 5 people, there are 3 dialysis machines. Who gets them? Well, you don't even discuss that today because dialysis is like getting your blood pressure checked. But the underlying question, the apportionment of health care, is still a very relevant one. So bioethics reacts to the situation. It never really gets formed prior to the situation because we have no idea what's coming. It's going to change with advances in medicine, but we know from our experience that ethics always lags behind technology. And so that when the ventilator was able to keep people alive for prolonged periods of time, only then did we face the choices of Karen Quinlan, for example. What do we do? My dad was a physician. He did not face the same ethical choices I did, nor did Marianne's dad. Our dads were in medical school together. It was very appropriate that we met at the same medical school both of our fathers attended. Now we have social ethics. These are the moral principles that govern what is or is not acceptable social behavior for a group of people as a whole. And it's a code of conduct. And social ethics will change with the culture, with the ethnicity, with the country, and so on. Here's a bunch of Vietnamese kids. Pull out a camera, kids congregate. This was at a kindergarten run by the Sisters of St. Paul of Chartres. Already between the ages of 3 and 5, they understood, they couldn't articulate, but they understood a certain social ethic. Some of it was intuitive. Some of it the sisters were teaching them, and some of it they would learn as they grow up in the culture of, this happened to be in the Mekong Delta. So social ethics are the rules that govern our conduct. There probably is an inherent social ethic that is inborn, but the rest of it we're going to learn depending on the situation in which we live. Ethics are not islands. All the various forms of ethics are going to intersect rather like a good game of pickup sticks. And when there's a change made in one of the ethical dilemmas or one of the ethical problems, it is going to affect several other ethical dimensions. So there's a lot of interdependence that will vary depending on the question, but a shift in one will affect the others.